A Nevada man whose home was raided last month by the Joint Terrorism Task Force says he is still waiting for the return of his property.
Chuck Clark, a self-described military watchdog, says FBI agents and other lawmen used a sealed search warrant to seize his property, including computers and personal files. This came after Clark took the I-Team on a tour outside the infamous Area 51 military base.
George Knapp is here to tell us what's happened to the case since then. George.
Gary and Paula, other than the raid itself and an FBI interview with Chuck Clark's webmaster, the case hasn't gone too far. Clark has not been charged with anything and has had no further contact with the government, but he hasn't been given his property back either. He thinks this was all an intimidation tactic meant to scare him away from keeping an eye on Area 51. The raid on Chuck Clark's modest trailer and tiny Rachel came just a few days after he escorted the I-Team on a tour of the perimeter of Area 51. Neighbors snapped photos of the FBI agents and other lawmen from the Terrorism Task Force as they carted away Clark's computers, photos, and files.
They're sort of paranoid about this location, and I don't see why. There's not really a thing in sight and anywhere close.
Clark is an admitted pain in the rear to the people who run Area 51. He spent years exploring the outer edges of the super-secret base, shooting photos of the facility from faraway vantage points, compiling information from public sources, and then posting his findings on the website of Rachel's Little Ailey Inn. He's also written a visitor's guide to the base, which has been the testing ground for the most sensitive military technology of the past 50 years. Clark is well known to the security force which guards the base. He's routinely shadowed by the so-called camo dudes and has been picked up by the array of cameras and other sensors positioned all around the edge of the sprawling test facility. But it wasn't until he began exposing the existence of hidden spy gear on public land that his legal troubles began.
I found 31 or 32, and I've only covered 3 or 4 roads, and then they started pulling them and putting these time delays in that make them much harder to find.
Relying on a frequency counter, Clark is able to zero in on the secret sensors hidden in bushes on public land miles outside the edge of the base.
This is a motion detector, and it's also got a vibrator unit. It detects the metal from a car passing by.
Once he finds one, he digs it up, takes a photo, then puts it back. Still, tripping a sensor means a security vehicle is automatically dispatched to the scene. Clark says he's never removed a sensor.
But they're clearly marked, and I'm not about to go down that road. I'm sure I could be doing some long years in some nice federal facility somewhere.
5 days after he made that remark, his home was raided by federal agents. Clark declined to talk about the raid, but told us he thinks this is an intimidation tactic meant to make him back off his interest in Area 51. He says the people at the base know he isn't a terrorist. In our earlier interview, he said the military has no right to hassle citizens on public land and no justification for hiding spy equipment here.
They have about a 25-mile buffer zone out here, and it's all terrain like this. It gets rougher as you go. Why they have to put stuff outside the line, it escapes me. I found them over in the next valley as far as 8 miles outside the line.
The military has a long history of bending the law concerning Area 51. In the mid-'80s, the Air Force seized 89,000 acres of public land around Groom Lake and only later sought congressional permission to annex it. In the 1990s, it took control of high points used by the curious to peer down on Area 51. It also put up signs that falsely claimed that this is the boundary of the base, even though the real line is miles away. But is it legal to spy on private citizens on public land? Repeated inquiries to the BLM failed to turn up anything authorizing the military to do this. The Pentagon thus far has no comment. Longtime Nevada military watchdog Grace Patorti says if the Air Force didn't inform the BLM, the action could be illegal.
By what authority is the Air Force putting sensors on public lands, and is this another attempt by the Air Force to expand their boundaries?
The use of the Terrorism Task Force, she says, is typical of the civil rights excesses now allowed under the Patriot Act. Chuck Clark has similar thoughts.
If they think they can, by their nearby presence intimidate you, they will do that every chance they get, and it's not really right.
Already, the Nellis Range and the test site comprise the largest military facility in the Western Hemisphere. Area 51 has 525 square miles of restricted airspace. It isn't possible to get within 15 miles of the base itself, so it's tough to make the case that they don't already have enough of a buffer zone out there. Grace Patorti thinks that this may be a sign that the military is intending to make another land grab around Groom Lake. We'll keep an eye on that possibility. And tomorrow night at 6 o'clock, attempts by the military to get exemptions to environmental laws.
George, is the BLM saying whether it knows about these sensors?
Well, they didn't seem to know about it until we told them. I filed a Freedom of Information request several weeks ago asking for any records of an agreement with the Air Force that might allow this. BLM offices all over the state say there is no formal agreement between BLM and the Air Force. The latest comment from BLM is that this is a law enforcement matter. I should talk to the U.S. Attorney's Office, which of course told me it cannot comment as a matter of policy. Chuck Clark had told me that, if they had just come to him and told him to knock it off, he'd do that. I guess the government's position is by handling these things, they disable them and effectively interfere with government property. So that's why they've been coming after them.
Thank you, George. Very interesting.